fact, opinion and bias session. So we're back onto English. So let's begin, as we have done with all of the other sessions so far today, a quick kind of poll just to get a sense of how you all feel about this topic. So in the chat box, put your numbers 1 to 10. So if you're thinking, what is fact, opinion and bias? I've got no idea, then give a 1. If it's something you've kind of studied before and you feel fairly confident with it, give yourself sort of an 8 or 9. So I'll just give you a second to throw those in. Okay, so you're in the middle, Phil. Okay, and Shaw's 8.5. Louise, 7, 8. Great. Okay, thanks, Andrea. 6. Yeah, so you're a 6 as well, Libby. Great. Okay. Excellent. Thanks for responding. So in this session, we've got 3 kind of main session objectives. So the first thing we're going to do is explain the difference between fact, opinion, and bias. So the aim of this session is really for you to be able to explain the difference between fact, opinion, and bias. Not me, because obviously I've practiced doing it a few times. So obviously if we can get some good interaction and a few comments in the chat box, that'll be a really great way to kind of see that you've picked up that. So that's the first thing. What is the difference between fact, opinion, and bias? The second thing is then to look at a text and for you guys to be able to actually identify which ones are fact, which ones are opinion, and which ones are bias. So there's a bit of an activity in there. And then at the end of the session, we will evaluate things. So we'll see what we can remember as a bit of a reminder. Right. So on we go then. So we've got this kind of table on the screen. You can see it says fact on the left, we've got opinion in the middle, and we've got bias on the right. Bias is the bigger column because it's the most kind of complicated of the 3, and it's the thing we're going to be talking about the most. But first of all, let's just be clear on what we mean by a fact. So, with a fact, we're going to be thinking about something that is true, and something that has evidence. So if I give you an example of a fact, I might say the sun is hot. So this is a fact because it's true and there's evidence. I can feel the heat of the sun. I know it's hot. So just very quickly, in the chat box, can you all write me a fact? We'll just check that you're all happy with that. Something nice and short, just like mine. Something that's true and something which is some clear evidence. Rain is wet. I like it, Louise. Good. So we'll just let a few more come through just to check everyone's happy. Snow is white. Good. Paul's just eating his lunch. Good. So again, we've got the evidence because we can feel the wetness. We can see the whiteness. Paul, obviously, his lunch has disappeared, so he's clearly eating it. We're still in lockdown. Absolutely. Good. So there we go. Those are all facts. And the second thing is something that someone thinks. And I'm going to put at the bottom, not always evidence. So I might say, for example, let's go for, cheese is great because I love cheese. So there we go. That's my opinion. Some people don't like it. There's not really, I'm not showing evidence for why cheese is great. It's just something I think. So you can see how that compares with the fact on the left. So same again, see if you can all write me a quick opinion in the chat box. So something that you think, something that's your opinion. Great. You've actually kind of sidestepped a little bit into bias there, Louise, which is interesting. So we'll talk about that in a minute. Not very good at functional skills, so that's your opinion, Adam. Yeah, sure. No, that's it's a really nice example actually there, Louise, and it's interesting to talk about that in a minute. So it's good that you did that. Yeah, good. Well done, Paul. My lunch was nice. Functional skill is amazing. Absolutely. Okay, good. Yeah, so you might say, if you like football, Manchester United are brilliant, or I don't know, Spain is the best country. I love dogs. Exactly, that's another one. So all of these things are just opinions. So we've got things like facts and we've got opinions. And on their own, these are fine. We understand them pretty clearly. But then we get the kind of murky world of bias. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you what bias is. And then I'm going to give you 4 ways to identify bias. They're not the only 4 ways, but they're 4 good ways of trying to identify bias in a text. So first of all, let me quickly write down what bias is. Oops, a couple of typos. Let's just tidy those up. There we go. So that's what bias is. So bias is when the writer gives their opinion. So a writer is going to give an opinion, but they're not giving their opinion just to share their opinion. They're giving their opinion with the intention of influencing you, the reader. So this might be done, for example, if they want you to buy something, if it's an advert, or you get it a lot in politics, especially when you're watching the news, because they want you to kind of believe what they're saying, or they want you to kind of support their party or something like that. So bias is something you do see a lot, especially in the news. So let's look at 4 different ways that we might be able to identify bias. The first one is this. Quite often you see things that say it's a fact. So I might say, if I use my example of the cheese, so I might say to you, it's a fact that cheese is great. I've written it's a fact, but it's not a fact. I've just written it to make you think it is a fact. So by doing that, I'm trying to convince you that cheese is great. I'm trying to make you think it is when it's just an opinion. So that's a really kind of good way of spotting bias in a text. So that's the first one. And I know I'm doing a little bit of talking at this point, but you will get a chance to practice in a minute. Another example is when they say something like everyone knows. So you might see a phrase like this. Again, using the cheese example, everyone knows that cheese is great. So you can see here, you've got your opinion, cheese is great. But what I've actually done is I've kind of manipulated that opinion by putting a bit of bias at the start. So I'm saying that everyone knows cheese is great. How do we know everyone knows? We can't possibly know that. But it's something that's a kind of technique that writers use. An interesting one, and this is the one that Louise used earlier, is the word best. And obviously, I'm saying this from sort of when you think of bias, you have to think of it in context. So the way Louise was kind of giving her opinion there, she probably wasn't trying to use bias. But if you were reading this in a newspaper, then it would be biased, because within the context of what they're talking about, they're trying to influence you. So with English, as always, it's not straightforward. You do have to consider the context, but it is a good thing to be aware of. So I might say, for example, cheese is the best food in the world. And you see this a lot. If you've watched the film Elf, this is in the film Elf when he goes to the coffee shop and he has the best coffee in the world. It's a very typical thing that you get in advertising. So here I'm saying cheese is the best food in the world. I'm not giving any kind of evidence. I'm not giving any supporting statistics. I'm just saying it. And when you read that, it kind of influences you a little bit. So I can see there's a few comments in the chat. So let me just have a quick look and see what you've written. Yeah, exactly, Libby. Yeah, so it would depend on the context. If you were sort of in a school competition or something and they said, tell you about my daughter, and you said, my daughter is the best daughter in the world, that would clearly be biased. You'd be trying to influence them. But yeah, if it was kind of an informal conversation with your partner or something, obviously you're not intending to persuade your partner because he probably already believes that. So you'd just be chatting. So it is always in context, but it's just to make you aware really that these are some of the techniques that writers use to try and sort of influence you when you're reading. Dogs are better than cats. Exactly, that's a great example of bias there. The last one, and this is the tricky one, is language techniques. What do I mean by language techniques? Does anyone know? I think Eamon mentioned a couple in her session. What's a language technique? Maybe someone can give me an example. Yeah, persuasive, exactly. So you often hear about persuasive language techniques, and that would certainly be relevant with bias. Can you give me an example of a persuasive language technique? So I will throw a few things of myself into the chat box. In fact, I don't know why I use the chat box. I can use the screen, can't I? Up here, getting carried away. Yeah, so language techniques might be things like rhetorical questions, repetition. Anyone think of any other things? I'm sure you all must have covered this at some point, or some of you. Exaggeration, yeah, absolutely. Good. Hyperbole is kind of the technical term that we use for exaggeration, absolutely. So maybe, obviously, if language techniques, if I'm talking here about language techniques and you're not really sure what I'm talking about, get onto some language technique sessions, maybe kind of contact Paul and Eamon and me and say, I don't know what language techniques are, and then we can tell you all about it. But yeah, they're really important things to be aware of kind of in English. So basically, if I said something like, this is a bad example, but there we go. If I wrote something like that, so I might say, cheese is a cheeky, cheesy treat. You can see immediately that sounds a bit strange. And what I've done there is I've used a bit of alliteration. And I've also used the rule of three, which I can see Eamon's kind of put in the chat box there as well. So I've turned this kind of statement, instead of me just giving an opinion on cheese, I've sort of decorated it with language techniques. And language techniques are designed to achieve end results in English. So if you want to write a persuasive text, you use persuasive language techniques. If you want to write a descriptive text, you use descriptive language techniques. So if you see a writer using language techniques, you know they're trying to achieve something, especially when they're using persuasive ones. So that's a really good, again, a good clue that there's some bias happening. Okay, so I think I've talked a lot. So let me quickly cover these up, because you're going to use these in the next bit of the session. So we've got 4 ways to recognize bias. In the chat box, see if you can remember what they are and tell me what they are. Quick bit of revision before we move on to the next bit. Good, so the word best, that's a big clue. Well done, Louise. So we've got 3 more. It's a fact, excellent. Well done, Libby. Everyone knows, good. And what was the last one? Well done, Philip. So we've got best, fact, everyone knows. And how else might we? Language techniques, exactly. So if you see any of those 4 things, often that is a clue that there's some bias happening. So let's have a practice. On this screen here, you can see you've got different sentences, and I've got numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. What I want you to do in the chat box, put number 1, and then next to it, type fact, opinion, bias. So one or the other. So tell me which one is going on. Exactly, so good example there. So Louise has put number 1, fact. It is a fact because you can see the number 7, because this is evidence. Good. So I'll let you try all of the others. Just go ahead, drop them in the chat box. I'll watch and kind of see generally how you do. So have a go at all of those. Great, thanks Paul and Sophie for sharing that file, and Eamon as well, that's really helpful. Okay, well done everyone, good. So I can see we're getting through, so we're up to number 5, good stuff. Really good, well done. And Enrique, brilliant, and Andreas, well done. Louise is on number 8, excellent. Well done. Okay, so I can see we're up to about number 6, so just the last 3 to go. So I'll just give you kind of another maybe 30 seconds. Well done, Andreas, well done. And good stuff, Danielle, I can see you got all those in the chat box, brilliant. All right, well done, good. So I will go over it. Obviously, we've got a bite-sized session, so I don't want to take up too much time. So let's have a look at these then. So the first one, as we discussed, is a fact, because we've got 7 shifts. We can see that quite clearly. Number 2 is bias. How long will it take people to work out that HIIT workouts are out of this world? So we've got a rhetorical question, we've got repetition. So lots of things going on in there. So there's lots of uses of language techniques. The third one, I think the IT team is great. That's just an opinion. Someone thinks. Number 4, it's clearly a fact that too many people enjoy sunbathing. That's bias, because you've got this word over here. It's clearly a fact. Good. The shop is open from 9 till 5. That's a fact, because we've got the times, we've got the evidence. Number 6, we've got the word best. So that one's bias. See, everyone's got most of these right, so that's really good. I think the new computer system is rubbish. Quite a strong statement, but it's still just an opinion, what someone thinks. Number 7, everyone loves Nike trainers. How do we know that everyone loves Nike trainers? We can't possibly know that, so that's bias. And then the last one is kind of the trick one, really. 100% of people said they want to leave. So on surface value, I would say that's a fact. But obviously, whenever you've got statistics being used, you have to take it into context. They may have only asked one person. That one person said they wanted to leave, and so that would be 100%. So on one level, it would be a fact, but on another level, it might be biased because it's kind of not representational of the larger population. So you do have to be a little bit careful with statistics. But yeah, on surface level, that would be a fact. So really,
Sam,
yeah.
Sorry, Sam. I was going to mention number 6. Just something I thought that if that one had a bit more information, this is the best school in town based on Ofsted results, or based on attendance figures, or based on whatever. That could become a fact, but without that evidence.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, good. But obviously, that isn't always the case. Which is what I was trying to explain a little bit with the kind of Elf reference. I don't know if you've seen that film. Or if you, for example, if you walk into a coffee shop and they've got a big sign on the roof saying best coffee in town, you know, that's obviously advertising. It's biased because they're not sort of saying why it's the best coffee. But yeah, Paul, you're absolutely right. If it did have more information, if it listed the Ofsted results, if it had reviews from learners and things, you know, then maybe it wouldn't be biased. But it would have to have clear evidence to show that it is the best. Because obviously the best means the one that's better than all of the others in that town. So it would take quite a bit of evidence for that not to be biased. Cool. Let's jump on then to number 9. So that brings us to the end. So let's do a bit of revision then, just to finish off. So what is a fact? How do you, if your friend asked you, what's a fact? How would you explain it to them? Something that's true. Yeah, good. So you could say it's true. And how do we know something's true? Yeah, good, with evidence. Good. So it's kind of a simplistic explanation, but I think those two are quite nice sort of ways to remember. And what about an opinion? Good, yeah. So something someone thinks, and why is that often different to a fact? What does it often not have? Yeah, exactly. I'm going to put not always evidence, because sometimes it is, but for simplistic sake, we'll say not always. Good. And then what's bias? This is the tricky one. Who thinks they can give me a quick, maybe couple of words just to summarize what we mean by bias? Yeah, good. So writer tries to influence reader. That's essentially what bias is. Yeah, exactly. They do it by giving their opinion in a sort of in a tricky way. So 4 ways to identify bias then. I'll put this over here. I know you've run through these once already, but we'll do it again because it's good for memory. So, oops, just get my pen to work here. Okay, there's our list. So what are the 4 ways, or what are 4 good ways to kind of recognize bias in a text? Like I say, they're not the only ways, but they're kind of pretty common. Good. So let's say language techniques. Excellent. It's a fact. Good. Best. Excellent. And everyone knows. Perfect. Really nice. Great. There we go. Oh no. There we are. Got it in the end. Excellent. All right, really good. So yeah, this is quite a big topic and there's a lot to cover. So you could go into a lot more detail, but obviously I think in 15 minutes, I think that's quite a lot. And that gives you some nice kind of things to focus on when you're trying to think about fact, opinion and bias and sort of identify those. So really good. Well done. So we have explained the difference between fact, opinion and bias, and I've seen you all do it in the chat box, or maybe not all of you, but certainly a lot of you. So I know that you can explain the difference, so that's really good. You've all had a go at identifying fact, opinion and bias, and pretty much everyone did that correctly, so that's really good. So again, I've seen evidence that you can do that. And then we did the revision at the end, so you kind of, you again summarized everything at the end there. In terms of when you see it in everyday life or at work, you might see it a lot in the news. You might notice it in work emails or communications. So it's a good thing to look out for in kind of general life as well. So let's finish off. And I know this has gone on a little bit longer than it probably should, but thinking about fact, opinion and bias, give me a confidence score from 1 to 10. So think about how difficult or easy you found the session and drop some numbers in the chat box, just so I can get a sense of how you're all feeling about the topic. Yeah, opinion and bias are pretty close with you, yeah, absolutely. Awesome, yeah, so lots of 7s, 8s, 9s, good stuff, brilliant. And in future learning, I'm going to put skills forward. Also, I think Eamon and Paul shared a worksheet. So definitely have a look at that worksheet and familiarize yourself with language techniques, because language techniques are really central to a lot of the stuff you do in English. You've probably heard things like purpose of text, so it's really closely linked to that, really closely linked to fact, opinion and bias. So it's a good thing to sort of top up on. All right, thanks a lot, everyone. I'll stick around for a couple of minutes if you've got any questions, but if not, thanks for attending and probably see you on the next one. Cheers, bye.